Hello everyone. Welcome to the second session of our Arbiter manual discussion. Earlier we discussed Article 1, 2 and 3. Today we'll be discussing about Article 4 and 5, which is act of moving pieces and completion of the game. Let's begin with Article 4, the act of moving the pieces. So our last session was the Article 3, if at all there is some issues in Article 3, it is said to be an illegal. So when the move doesn't matches with the Article 3, it is an illegal. So now it is act of moving pieces. So anything that is other than Article 3 is not an illegal. So whenever the clock comes and the other thing comes, there will be some exceptions apart from this Article 3. Let's look on to that later. So now let's begin with Article 4, the act of moving the pieces. First, each move must be played with one hand only. So a player makes the move with the right hand, then the opponent makes a move with the right hand. Now the white again plays in his or her left hand. Who calls, the opponent calls it is an illegal. So this is where we need to be aware of. This is under act of moving pieces, so we can just provide a warning. So how much warning we can provide? So that depends. Later we will be see how we can penalize the player. We shouldn't be very strict. As a teacher, in Tamil, what we say is Asiriyar. Asiriyar means tavarugalai kalaibar. We as an arbiter, it's a part of the role where we need to teach or educate the players, and we shouldn't be so hard on them. We need to tell them this is what the law says, this is the rule. And then the player will come and say like, no, you are just supporting the opponent, you're doing that. And after the game, the player calls his or her parent, the father or mother comes, no, why did you do that? The only thing what you need to do is wait. For example, say like whenever we go to the restaurant, it takes like almost 15 to 20 minutes to serve the starter. The only thing when you call the waiter, he says, okay, it's on the way, ma'am. It's on the way, sir. This is what he says. Nothing apart from that. So the players will really test our patience. So we need to be more aware of what is happening. We shouldn't be tempered or short tempered or anything. Nothing works there as an arbiter. So what we need to do is we need to make sure this is what the rule says. That's what we shouldn't get tensed, or our BP shouldn't get raised or nothing happen. Just simple. So this particular article will like shoot up your BP like anything, like if when the player claims. So like for the first two boards you would have told like, okay, this is okay, this is okay. When the third board or fourth board comes, automatically the first second decisions will also like you will be throwing out there like, no, this is not, we can't be harsh on the players. So that's where the arbiter role plays uh, a major importance in every events. So each move must be played with one hand only. Next, only the player having the move may adjust. This is because like when there is only 10 seconds for white and the white player is thinking, and the opponent suddenly puts his hand inside the board in front of the face or eyes of the opponent, say, I adjust. That's not possible. So based on that time pressure, the opponent shouldn't like get it. So we can penalize. Later there is an option how we can penalize the players, but we need to be very aware of the situation. We need to be very careful, like on where the opponent does, why it does, whether it's due to the intention. That's why there will be few places it's mentioned as unless the arbiter decides otherwise. That's where you can just take some good decisions and major decisions on that. So only the player having the move may adjust one or more pieces on their squares, provided that he first expresses in his intention, for example, by saying J adobe or I adjust. Normally in English, we say I adjust. So he need to say I adjust, then touch the piece, and then he could adjust. That's what he could do. So the player who has the move. So the other player shouldn't do that. So this article 4.2.1 may only be used to correct displaced pieces. If the opponent is not present, then an arbiter, if present, should be informed before any adjustment takes place. The player should not always announce his intention to adjust a piece. If he does not do this in the normal, if he does not do this, then the normal touch move rules apply. If he doesn't say I adjust, then he need to make that move. He need to touch that piece and make that. So 4.2.2. Any other physical contact with the piece except for clearly accidental contact. For example, sometimes the player might write like this, move like this with the pen, and they'll just say this in touched it. And sometimes when the opponent goes to touch a piece like this, here the piece touches. So normally what we could say, the player, when the opponent claims like he touched here in this pen while writing. So we could say whether the player moves with this pen. No. And if he accepts, like, okay, then we need to also inform that particular player who touched with this here, keep the pen down and then make a move. So, for example, if he moves, he touches this slide like this somewhere over here. So we need to say whether we touch the move like make the move like this or to touch the piece like this. It's not touching here. It needs to be placed here. So we'll be informed the particular player that okay, just make sure it doesn't touches anywhere. This is what we could do. Opponent still say no. If he touches, that is queen is lost. That is lost. Never hear anything. Don't get into the game. Just simply say continue. That's it. That's what we could say. There's no touched piece or anything. So, any other physical contact with the piece except for clearly accident contact shall be considered to be intent. For example, here, according to this rule, if a player has not said I adjust, so here has not said I adjust or something similar before touching a piece, or touching the piece is not accidental. It's not accidental. We are talking about earlier, we discussed about what accidental is. Here, it's not accidental. The touched piece must be moved. For example, if white played bishop e2, this bishop e2 into g5, by lifting the bishop and then removing the knight, the bishop on e2 must be moved as it was touched intending to move. So, in this case, the e2 bishop cannot capture the knight. Since he had captured the knight, so the bishop on d2 will go and capture. So it's by lifting. That's what the opponent say. If white played bishop e2 into g5, by lifting the bishop and then removing the knight, the bishop on e2 must be moved as it was touched, intending to move. So first the touched move here is the bishop on e2 is touched. So he need to move the bishop. For example, if the knight is touched first, he need to capture with the bishop on d2. That's what we're about to mean. So if the e2 is touched, he need to move that place. So this will be considered as an illegal because the bishop on e2 don't capture the knight on g5. So because the bishop is not going in a way, it's coming under Article 3. So this is what we need to be aware of. 4.3. Except as provided in Article 4.2, if the player having the move touches on the chessboard with the intention of moving or capturing. So here there are more options. So if the player having the move touches on the chessboard with the intention of moving or capturing, one or more of his pieces, he must move the first piece touched that can be moved. For example, he touched the pawn and then the rook. So the piece that is touched first is the pawn. He need to move the pawn. If he's touching the bishop and then the knight, he need to move the bishop. So suppose if that bishop, like moving it, if it is an illegal move, he need to go for the next piece. So that's allowed, we'll be looking onto that later. So one or more of his own pieces, he must move the first piece touched that can be moved. Next, one or more of his opponent's pieces, he must capture the first piece touched that can be captured. For example, uh, here in this case, consider if there is a pawn on b5. So the opponent have first touched the knight and then the pawn. So now the knight should be captured with the bishop on d2. Suppose if the knight cannot be captured, for example, say if the knight is on say g6. If he touches the knight on then c, oh, it cannot be touched, captured, then he touches the pawn, he definitely need to capture the pawn on b5. So that's what they say. One or more of his opponent's pieces, he must capture the first piece touched that can be captured. So 4.3.3, one or more pieces of each color, he must capture the first touched opponent's piece with its first touched piece. For example, one or more pieces of each color. So he must capture the first touched opponent's piece with his first touched piece. So this is what we have seen here. He have touched the bishop on e2 and captured the knight, which is not possible since at all if he had captured. So the clock rule, if it is there, if the bishop captures knight and if he haven't pressed the clock, then he is okay to take it back since it is an illegal. But since he had taken that knight, so he need to capture the knight with his bishop on d2. So that's what says if this is illegal, move or capture the first piece touched that can be moved or okay, if this is illegal, move or capture the first piece touched that can be moved or captured. So bishop on e2 cannot capture the knight on g5. Since he had touched the knight on g5, there is another possibility of the bishop on d2 that could capture the knight, so he need to capture it first. If it is unclear whether the player's own piece or his opponent's was touched first, so suppose consider there are two pieces, for example, a pawn, white pawn on a4 and black pawn on b5. He is about to go and touch both the pieces. If it is unclear whether the player's own piece or his opponent's piece was touched first, the player's own piece shall be considered to have been touched before his opponent's. So if it's not, anyways, going to be a touch more rule. He need to touch whatever he played with his piece. His own piece is considered to have touched first. So that's what they have said like the player's own piece shall be considered to have been touched before his opponents. If a player having the move, one more case, touches his king and a rook, he must castle on that side if it is illegal, if it is legal. So if he touches his king and the rook, then he must castle on that side if it is illegal. Deliberately touches the rook and then his king, is not allowed to castle. So here, if he touches the rook, so definitely then the option here is he is not allowed to castle. So it shall be governed by Article 4.3.1. What does it say? One or more of his own pieces, he must move the first piece touched. So here the rule here is has touched the rook and the king. So opponent is like castling is not possible. So what we could do is, so the rook should be played. He is not supposed to castle. So in this case, the player must move his rook if possible. If no rook move is possible, he should move his king, because the intention is there are two pieces. Suppose consider that is the rook which is under, which is not possible to move because there is a knight or bishop something in between which is not able to move. For example, the rook on h1, there is a pawn on h2, there is a knight on g1. He's something like mistakenly touched the rook and king thinking that it is possible. Sometimes it happens in GM's case as well. Like the king would have been moved. Again, the king would have just went back and came to the square where the castling is possible. He could have just castled. Then they would have think like, oh, I have castled it. Sometimes what it happens is like if they need some time to think, they might make an illegal move like this so that they could just take some time on that. Sometimes it is possible. It's not like few are doing that. Sometimes it is possible. It's like what we say in the law. There are some loopholes. This is not the loopholes as such. This is how some players use these rules like that. There are two illegals that can be done. The one illegal can be like made simply like the king. Suppose there is only 10 seconds on the clock. The player has made it two, but he is unable to find it within the 10 seconds. He just takes his king and goes like a queen and captures something. Then the opponent claims for an illegal. That's what happens. So that's why like we sometimes suggest the players not to call for the arbiter for an illegal, or let's play and win the game. So even I have heard from few arbiters stating that Prag and Vaishali, like both grandmasters, like when they were playing in the games, like they haven't called for illegal moves, claiming that he have played that illegal, claimed that illegal. They have just I have just heard about that. Not sure like if someone knows like if it is true or like can comment on it. So 4.3.1, that's what we have looked out to. Now 4.4.3. Intending to castle touches the king and then a rook. But castling with this rook is illegal. The player must make another legal move with the king, which may include castling with the other rook as well. Suppose he have touched the king and the rook, but the king cannot move to g1 and the rook cannot come to f1 for castling because there is some bishop which is attacking the f1 or g1 square. So it is not possible. But still, the castling is possible on the other side if the king has no legal move. For example, if the king cannot move anywhere, the player is free to make any other legal move. Since even though like he had touched it, castling is not possible. He found that is not possible. He can make any other legal move since the king has no legal moves. So the player is free to make any legal move. Suppose he want to castle on the queen side, he can. He is free to do that. Suppose there is that is also not possible. The king cannot move to any squares. Everywhere is being guarded. Suppose the king is on e1, pawn on e2, and there's a rook on d8, black rook on d8. There's another black rook on f8. The king cannot move anywhere. Then he's free to move any other moves. Castling is also not possible as well here. So please note that castling is a king move. If a player tries to castle and it is found to be illegal, then the player must make a king move that is legal. If there is no legal move of the king, the player is free to make any move. He's not obliged to move the rook as well. So the castling is a king. So if at all he have touched the king and the rook, he is about to castle it. Since castling is not possible, so king is also not able to move. So shouldn't ask the opponent to make you could just move the rook since because you have just tried to castle. That's not possible. That's why they are very precise and clear now. So castling is a king move. So that's why they wanted the V2 like give a decision stating that the opponent is free to make any other move. We can't ask the player to make a move with the rook. That's what they are about to here of it. So 4.4.4 promotes a pawn. The choice of the piece is finalized when the piece has touched the square of promotion. Suppose the white player plays from e7 to e8. He has taken his queen on the hand and he thinks like taking the queen is a stalemate. So he could just free to take the rook and place it on the square. Suppose the queen has touched the square, intended square of variable which is 8, then he need to place it. Suppose he has some other pieces and he takes a knight. Only when he touches, it's not like he says rook, arbiter, queen. No, he can just ask for any other pieces, but it is finalized only when the piece has touched the square of promotion. The piece should touch it. When a player places an inverted upside down rook on the promotion square and continues the game, the piece is considered as a rook. Even if he names it as a queen or any other piece, if he moves the upside down rook diagonally, it becomes an illegal move. On his own move, the opponent may turn the rook the right way up. However, to avoid conflict, it is advisable that an arbiter is requested to do this. So when I was doing my examination, I was asking, suppose consider, sir, the king is on, white king is on f6 and the inverted rook, the rook which is upside down, which is stated queen as white, he places it on g7 and there is a black king on h8. Now, actually, when the player calls and say sir, it's a checkmate. So now, if I go and keep the upside down rook, which is stated as queen, now I place or mark it as a rook, that is a stalemate. So here we need to be aware the previous move, if at all he had moved like a rook and he have kept there, then we could say okay, it's rook, so it's a stalemate. If it is a queen, the queen can't come from f8 or h6, so because that would have already been in check, so it's not possible. So we could just simply turn the inverted rook upside down and say, okay, it's a stalemate and the game ends there. So that's where we need to be clear. So we could place some other, we could just hear some other problem stating that my son has checkmated and you haven't done the same when the parents come or the player. Means we need to be like careful while giving decisions and we need to discuss them like, look, this, we are here to educate you. You are here to learn from the mistakes. Say the player or the parent might come and say like, no, give him win now. Like we learn from the mistakes. Opponent learn from the mistakes. Players learn from the mistakes. So if you had placed that in what, suppose the player might say, no, there I didn't see any arbiter there. The clock was running. He could have passed the clock. So that's what we ever need to educate. We can't say like if at all we are given the win for this particular person, he could have came first. Nothing comes there. So here that bitter manual says, it is not possible. Inverted or upside down rook is not a queen. So we need to be careful on it. So 4.5, if none of the pieces touched in accordance with Article 4.3 or Article 4.4 can be moved or captured, the player may make any legal move. Suppose consider like none of the pieces touched, or based on 4.3 and 4.4, what we saw in the previous 2 points, can be moved or captured, the player make any legal moves. The act of promotion may be performed in various ways. Here, the pawn does not have to be placed on the square of arrival. Suppose if the pawn is on e7, white pawn on e7, it shouldn't go and touch the e8. The player could take the e7 pawn outside, keep it, and place a queen or rook on e8. So this is what they are going to say in 4.6.1. 4.6.2, removing the pawn and putting the new piece on the square of promotion may not occur in any order. So that's what they are about to say. They can place the queen and then take the pawn. So they can't place the queen, press the clock, and take the pawn on side. That which we will see that later. And if an opponent's piece stands in the square of on the square of promotion, it must be captured. So if there is an opponent's piece, so on the square of promotion, it must be captured. So we can't just simply place it or somewhere. If it is there, some piece, we need to capture it. So if an opponent's piece stands on the square of promotion, it must be captured. Capture it, and then we need to make the act of promotion. When as a legal move or part of a legal move, a piece has been released on a square, it cannot be moved to another square on this move. The move is considered to have been made in the case of, okay, so we'll discuss one by one. When as a legal move or a part of legal move. So while discussing this 4.7.1 and point 2, we'll see what is part of legal move. A piece has been released on a square. It cannot be moved to another square on this move. The move is considered to have been made in the case of a capture. So first option is a capture. When the captured piece has been removed from the chessboard and the player, having placed in his own piece on its new square, has released this capturing piece from his hand. So here a capture when the captured piece has been removed. So here we can't just move it to another square or place it, because suppose there is a piece pawn on white pawn on e7 and there is a black piece on say for example d8 or f8. So when a captured piece has been removed, that piece has been removed. Player having placed his own piece on its new square, that has been done, has released this capturing piece from the hand. So it cannot be moved to another square on this move. So once it is done, the piece is said to be, okay, it's done. We cannot move it on the particular move, or it cannot be moved to another square on this particular move. So next example is during castling. When the player's hand has released the rook on the square, previously crossed the king. That is, if the king is on c1, then the rook is on d1, he has released his hand. When the king is on g1, the rook will come to f1. That's what, like, it's the square previously crossed by the king. That's what they are about to say. When the player has released the king from his hand, the move is not yet made, but the player no longer has the right to make any move other than castling on that side if this is legal. So if the king has moved to 2 squares from e1 to g1 or e1 to c1, so if he has moved the king from e1 to g1, then the player no longer has the right to make any other move other than castling on that side, if this is legal. If castling on this side is illegal, the player must make another legal move with his king. So which we have already seen, which may include castling with the other rook. If the king has no legal move, the player is free to make any legal move. This is what we have seen earlier. That's why, like, it's really very clear, like it's becoming like very clear nowadays. Like there is no confusion on these articles nowadays. It's being very precise and clear. So promotion, when the player's hand has released the new piece on the square of promotion and the pawn has been removed from the board, so it is said to be done. 4.8. A player forfeits his right to claim against his opponent's violation of Articles 4.1 to 4.7 once the player touches a piece with the intention of moving or capturing it. So a claim cannot be made. A claim can be made during his move, but a player forfeits its right to claim against his opponents. He cannot make once the player touches a piece with the intention of moving or capturing. Once it is touched or moving, there is no option that he can claim against his opponents violation. Whatever we have seen in 4.1 to 4.7, once it is done, the player need to claim. He cannot touch a piece or move or the intention of touching or moving or capturing, then he cannot claim it. 4.9, if a player is unable to move the pieces, an assistant who shall be acceptable to the arbiter may be provided by the player to perform this operation. It's like a scribe writing an exam, like the particular player shouldn't know like about chess. The player is unable to move an assistant who shall be acceptable to the arbiter. Suppose when that cases comes, we need to ask someone like whether this we can just ask for some we can't just if we are sure about it, we can just take decisions. It's okay to learn from our superiors. We can just get some ideas from our superiors and learn from them. So shall be acceptable to the arbiter. If we don't feel that he or she or is acceptable, if we don't know like whether he or she is acceptable, we can just call to someone, call to our federation, we can just call to our association, ask help from them whether it can be done. It's okay to ask help from them. So may be provided by the player to perform this operation, which is act of moving the pieces. If an arbiter observes a violation of article, so if the arbiter sees if there is any violation on Article 4, he must always intervene immediately. The arbiter cannot simply stand and say like, no, the opponent, let him claim. I need to just simply watch. I'm an arbiter. No. So that's what they are clear. He must always intervene immediately. He should not wait for a claim to be submitted by a player. So whenever there's an article or violation on 4, we need to be there, aware of it, and intervene in the middle. We can't just wait. Suppose consider if the player is who is known to us, not there, it's a rule. There, it's a book. We need to like abide to the laws and rules and regulations of this book. So now let's see Article 5, the completion of the game. When the game completes. So 5.1.1, the game is won by the player who has checkmated his opponent's king. This immediately ends the game. So suppose consider the black king is on h8, white king is on f6. The player has moved his queen from g1 to g7. Even though if there is a clock or no clock, if there is zero, the time flag falls or whatever it is, who has checkmated his opponent's king. So if there is only 1 second, the player moves before pressing, the time ends. So this immediately ends the game. So also provided that the move producing the checkmate position was in accordance with Article 3 and Articles 4.2 to 4.7. It means if the queen is on f1, it can't move to g7. So suppose if he moves something like that, so that will be as illegal. Suppose if the flag has fallen, then the opponent can't make any legal moves just with his king to win. So that will be a draw. We'll be looking on to that later as well. So when white has his queen and king, and when the black has only the lone king, and when white has a like it has its time, like it doesn't have any more time left on its clock, there will be still be a draw. We'll look onto that. So the game is won by the player who has checkmated his opponent's king, provided it shouldn't be an illegal move and it should comply with the act of moving the pieces. Article 3 and Article 4.2 to 4.7 must be valid when the checkmate had happened. So that's why the move should be a legal move while when the checkmate has been incorporated in the game. 5.1.2, the game is won by the player whose opponent declares he resigns. When the opponent says, I have resigned, this immediately ends the game. A player may resign in a different ways. He could stop the clock, announce his resignation that he's resigning, knocking over his king. It's not like throwing the king away. So just maybe like he just moves his king away. Reaching out his hand to the opponent, okay? He just gives his hand, okay, I have won. Signing the score sheets. So he could just write the score sheet 1001 like that, so and so on. These are some different ways that the game is won by the player whose opponent declares he resigns. All of these possibilities are capable of being misinterpreted. Therefore, the situation has to be clarified. At the end of a game, the arbiter should ensure that both score sheets show the same result. A player who does not wish to continue a game and leaves without resigning or notifying the arbiter is being discourteous. He may be penalized at the discretion of the chief arbiter for poor sportsmanship. Like we'll be looking onto more players, like when there are like about 35 minutes left in black's clock and 40 minutes left in white's clock. The black is about to checkmate white. I have seen few players just waiting to like while away the time, like all the time, like maybe like he might have the pressure, the player might have the pressure stating that I have lost on time because there might be pressure some from the coaches, some we don't know what is happening, but still we need to be aware of what is being happening and try to like educate them. Like we can't just make create a we can't just see a poor sportsmanship environment area. We need to like educate them that shouldn't be done. We can't just be forced on them. We could just give some guidance on like that shouldn't be done. So if we are seeing like without resigning or anything like being discourteous, we may penalize him. But based on that too, like we need to be like aware of uh, we need to educate the opponent, make sure like he realizes his mistake, and that's what like we need to be careful on penalizing at the discretion of the chief arbiter for our sportsmanship. So 5.2.1, the game is drawn when the player to move has no legal move and his king is not in check, the game is set to end in stalemate. This immediately ends the game, provided this should also the checkmate and the stalemate should be in accordance with Article 3 and 4.2 to 4.27. 5.2.2, the game is drawn when a position has arisen in which neither player can checkmate the opponent's king with any series of legal moves. Only when there are two kings or when there are pawns that are blocking each other, there is no legal moves, the king could enter the opponent's territory, like, or else both are having the bishops of same colored squares, but still they won't be able to get inside the opponents. Still, they have opposite colored bishops. All the pawns are lined in a different way. There's no series of legal moves. Even if we allow the black to play white's move, white to play black's move, it's not possible with any series of legal moves. The game is set to end in a dead position. This immediately ends the game, provided the move producing that position. The earlier position shouldn't be a legal move, shouldn't be an illegal move, or it shouldn't comply. If it is not complying with Article 4.2 to 4.7, then we need to be seeing what it is. So we need to say always see whenever we see the decision, it's good to give a voice that okay, what was your previous move? Even though it's a checkmate, okay, what is your previous move? If we see like the rook has come here, where did the rook come from? Suppose it has come from b1 to c8. If we are seeing that, oh, okay, then see, oh, what is happening? That's why we need to be aware. We shouldn't just see if it is a stalemate position or a checkmate position. We just need to see what was the previous mode. That's why it needs to comply with Article 4.3 and 4.2 to 4.7. So for 5.2.3, the game is drawn upon agreement between the two players during the game, provided both players have made at least one move. They can't just simply come and say the arbiter says start your game, play just both handshakes and etc. That's not good. That's why like few tournaments they say like at least 30 moves needs to be done before uh, both players can agree a draw. Even though before 30 moves, there could be like a repetition of three moves or something that could happen. And in few tournaments it happens. But we need to make sure at least both have played only one move, at least one. This immediately ends the game. So this rule is applicable only if Article 9.1.1 not to agree to a draw before a specified number of moves by each player is not in effect. That's why I say like in few tournaments, they would say like this is what they need to be aware of. Okay, 30 move rule. We need to see whether that particular tournament says whether the 30 move rule applies. The best way to conclude a game is to write down the result on the score sheet. If there is any, see Article 8, and for both players to sign it, this then forms a legal document, but even things can go wrong. So we need to be aware of like what is happening in 9.1.1 and Article 8, what is happening. So in Article 8, later when we see, we'll discuss about recording of the moves. So how it picks that draw and other abilities, and then 9.1. So if the competition rules cannot agree whether it's less than a specified number of moves. So we'll be looking onto this. So now we have come to a conclusion on the completion of the game. So later we will discuss on this doubt clearing session on Article 4 or Article 5. If you have any doubts, you are free to comment. Like based on my knowledge and experience, if I could answer your questions, I could clarify, or else I could get from my seniors. If there is any doubt that I cannot solve, I could just get clarity from them and I could help you out. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the session. See you on the next session or next week. Thank you. Bye.